Good morning, restaurant owners, and welcome to this week's live training for restaurant owners on accounting and finance and how to manage the finances for your independently owned restaurants. This week's presentation, let me share my screen, is Engineering Your Menu for Profit, the Tactical Playbook. We've got a lot to cover this week, and some of this is a little complex, so I'm going to go through it and bring over some other examples. But this is how you transform your restaurant's financial performance by strategically engineering your menu. This presentation will guide you through the proven tactics to maximize profitability while maintaining quality, revealing how small changes to your menu strategy can dramatically impact your bottom line. So turn your menu into a profit machine. Understand how your menu is organized. More importantly, how it is costing and the contribution margins it's driving to your bottom line. So the problem is you're selling a ton of food, but your bank account doesn't reflect it because your profit isn't baked into your menu. Most restaurant owners focus on sales volume, which is understandable. We all want higher sales volume, but don't overlook the financial architecture of your menu and the menu items and how they contribute to the bottom line. So the solution, in the next 20 minutes, we're going to cover recipe costing with precision techniques, the contribution margin analysis, which is different than the profit margin, the menu mix optimization to optimize that contribution margin so you're adding real dollars to the bottom line, and then portion control, its impact and solutions to standardize that portion control. These tactics should deliver the food gross profit margin your restaurants needs to thrive. So recipe costing cards, this is the foundation. Track the exact cost of every ingredient per the plated item. Nothing is too small to matter. Use Excel or specialized tools like Margin Edge or XtraChef to maintain accurate records. Excel is the long form and the hard work form. Use Margin Edge. That's our go-to system for paying your restaurant bills and tracking your profitability, and also for your detailed menu costing. So you're costing every single item, and it starts with batch recipe. When you create batches of, in the example here, soup, meat rub, a full tray of lasagna, but you're only serving portions per plated item, you have to cost out that batch recipe so you get accurate cost in your plated menu items. This mirrors the kitchen workflow and accounts for yield loss during cooking. And you can factor in waste and yield like trimmings when you cook a whole piece of brisket. There's loss in the trimmings, there's shrinkage, there's cook-off loss. You're tracking all that and baking that down, pun intended, to the actual plated portion. So batch recipe costing is where you start with your detailed recipe menu item costing. And then you're going to want to use weighted averages. For fluctuating ingredient costs, use a weighted average. So for example, on August 1st, $3 a pound at 20 pounds. August 5th, $3.40 a pound at 40 pounds. August 10th, $3.20 a pound at 30 pounds. You weight all that up and you come up with a weighted average of $3.24. So this smooths out the pricing volatility, which there's a lot of, especially since COVID. It reflects the actual cost over time and it prevents overreacting to short-term price spikes. Now, pro tip, not the one down below here, but you understand the industry, and if you understand that the prices of eggs are going up and it's not just a short-term price spike, it's probably going to stay up there for a while, then you might want to adjust your weighted average slightly. So it's taking the weighted average, but it's paying attention to what's going on in the industry as well. So here's the pro tip. When batch costing, like barbecue sauce. Divide the total batch cost into the yielded number of servings to get an accurate per portion cost. So 200 ounces would be a batch. If you use 1 ounce per plate, that's 200 servings. So you divide out those number of servings by the total batch cost, so you get an accurate cost of that particular ingredient and how it's adding to that plated menu item. We're costing out each item on your menu. This provides a repeatable, accurate cost per portion for every plate that uses the sauce. So we're starting with recipe costing cards. We're using tools like Margin Edge or Extra Chef to use today's technology to track all those costs. And in Margin Edge, as your vendor bills come in, as your vendor invoices come in, Margin Edge is tracking all those individual changes in pricing and adjusting your menu item costing as the price changes. It's doing it automatically. And you're starting your recipe costing with batch costing, and you're using weighted averages. Okay, the contribution margin is what we're getting to here. That's the real profit metric. So what is the contribution margin? It's your menu price, the actual dollar, minus the actual dollars of recipe cost. The contribution margin represents, sorry for the print is a little low here. The contribution margin represents the actual dollars each item contributes to your bottom line and what pays your bills, not just percentages. So what is contribution margin? I'm going to come back to that yellow box. So dish A, price is $18. The cost is $6. The contribution margin is $12 every time you sell that menu item. The actual food cost, 6 divided by 18, is 33%. On your dish B, the price is 16, the cost is 480. The actual contribution margin is $11.20. But that food cost is 30%. It's a better food cost than dish A, but dish A, every time you sell it, is actually contributing more dollars to the bottom line. It's a little bit of a confusing concept, but we're interested in dollars added to the bottom line and the overall mix of your menu. So that's what we're going to focus on when we analyze and engineer your menu, is the contribution margin, the quantity sold of each item and how many dollars that is contributing to the bottom line. So food cost percentage versus food cost margin, both are important. While food cost percentage indicates the efficiency of managing ingredient cost, contribution margin provides a more direct measure of the revenue each dish brings in to cover overhead and contribute to the bottom line. Food cost percentage is an important metric to track when analyzing financial statements and, like we said earlier, to measure your overall management of ingredient costs. Contribution margin is used to engineer your menu to higher overall dollars to the bottom line. So that's what we're focusing on here today, is that contribution margin. In previous trainings, we spent a lot of time focusing on tools to reduce your overall food cost percentage, and those are just as important. But today we're talking about your menu and how to engineer that menu to add more dollars to the bottom line. And here is where contribution margin is more important. So I hope that makes sense. And let's get into the menu mix and the total contribution analysis. Understand how your menu performs as a complete system by analyzing what actually sells. So the contribution margin is that total contribution margin formula. The total contribution margin is the contribution margin per each item by the number sold. So for example, 300 burgers at a $5 contribution margin is $1,500 contributed to the bottom line. 75 steaks, which you might think is more profitable and actually does have a much higher contribution margin per item, but the total contribution margin for that period is only $900. The burgers are actually adding more dollars to the bottom line. So we want to take that type of an analysis and build a quadrant graph, which I'm going to bring in here in just a little bit. Plot your menu items by contribution margin. So stars are high contribution margin and high value. Those are your menu stars. Puzzles are high contribution margin, but low value. You've got to figure out the puzzle to increase the volume on that high contribution margin item that isn't quite selling enough. Your workhorses are high volume, but not the highest contribution margin. You're selling a ton of them, like the burgers, and they end up producing maybe higher dollar volume to the bottom line than the stars. And your dogs are low contribution margin and low volume. So let me bring in, let's explain this a little bit in more detail. So this is the food cost contribution margin spreadsheet, chart, graph, whatever you want to call it, because we're going to bring up the chart here in just a second. So this is for any particular time period. This might be a week, a day, a month. We typically want to analyze this by the week so you can see what's happening week over week. So entree, item one, menu item one, is the amount sold is 25, the menu price is 16, the food cost is $25.21. Food cost percentage is 32.56, a little bit high. Contribution margin is $10.79. But you're selling 25 at $10.79. It's contributing $269.75 to the bottom line for that period. This probably would be, I would assume, a day, and maybe even be a shift. So the contribution margin as a percentage of the total contribution margin is 31.76. Whereas a high profitability item, item 4, at $10, the food cost is $2.15. The food cost percentage is only $21, but you're only selling 15, so it's only contributing 13.86% to the contribution margin. So here's the point. You do this analysis and Margin Edge will do this for you, or you can pull statistics out of Margin Edge very easily to create a spreadsheet like this. And then you plot these items on a quadrant graph. The stars are high popularity, so high sales volume and high profitability. So you've got menu item 1 and menu item 5. You're selling a lot. They're producing the highest contribution margin, and they're contributing the most to the overall contribution margin. So just keep that thought in mind. Your workhorses quadrant, this upper left quadrant, which they're very popular, you're selling a lot, but they're not that profitable. That's item 3. Your food cost is all the way up to 33% on that one. I'm sorry, that's item 2. But they're only contributing 18%, even though it's a high amount sold, third highest amount sold, the low contribution margin is only contributing 18%. So you're still selling a lot. It's a decent amount of profit, but it's a low ticket item, so it's a low contribution margin. The dogs, and we're going to look at the strategies for each one of these. The dogs are menu item 3, low seller, menu item 4, low seller, low contribution margin, because they're a low ticket item, even though one is a highly profitable, it's a low sales volume and a low ticket, so it's a low contribution margin. And so those are your dogs. Your puzzles would be very profitable items, And item 5 is close to that with a high contribution margin. So if this was not selling very much, it would be in that quadrant. Okay. So it takes some understanding on how to build this spreadsheet and analyze who are your highest contribution margins and your best sellers. So keeping these quadrants in mind, stars, workhorses, dogs, and puzzles, what's the strategy? So you promote your high contribution margin items with better menu placement. Train servers to suggest high contribution margin dishes. So if you had any puzzles that weren't selling much, that's who you would want to train your servers to suggest and sell more of those. The high contribution margin items that maybe aren't selling enough, move those to a better placement on the menu. So there's two strategies there. Consider repricing low contribution margin best sellers. So your two best sellers are 1 and 5. Let's move this down a bit. Their contribution margins are 10 and 10. They're high contribution margins. So the strategy was repricing low contribution margin bestsellers. That's going to be item number 2. So let's say you just increase that by 13%. That's going to move that up to a 20% of your overall contribution margin. Or instead of repricing, figure out a way to drive the cost down, make that a $3 cost. It bumps up that overall contribution of that particular menu item. So remove and replace dogs that don't perform, or change the pricing on the dogs to increase the contribution margin. So there's a lot of information there, a lot said. Come back and listen to this a second time. Take screenshots and apply this back in your own restaurant. So portion control and execution on plating your menu items is important as well. Even the best engineered menu falls apart without consistent execution. Oversized portions inflate food cost. Inconsistency damages customer experience. Lost margin compounds over thousands of dishes. A 10% overportion on a dish with a 30% food cost becomes 33% food cost, eroding your profit margin by 3% on every plate. Portion control is highly important. And so how do you implement that? Physical tools, digital scales, portion scoops, portion bags, pre-portioned containers, implementing all those tools to get consistent portion control for every single plated menu item. Process tools, line checks, pre-shift meetings, plate waste tracking, people tools, train on why behind portion control, not just how. So successful execution requires both tools and culture. Your team needs to understand how portions impact the restaurant's overall financial health. That's the last step in executing this menu engineering process. So just to rehash, measure and manage. You can't manage what you don't measure. The precise recipe costing is a non-negotiable to achieving your ideal profit levels. Contribution margin tells the story of how your menu is engineered to drive dollars to the bottom line. The real profit story of dollars contributed to the bottom line, not just percentages. Unlock the profit with menu mix. Understanding how each item is contributing on your menu to the total contribution margin for a given period, and how adjusting the price or the cost or driving the cost down and impacting the number of items sold by training your team can impact the overall contribution margin. And this is a very simple spreadsheet. You can imagine if you're analyzing this over a course of a month and you tweak a few things just a little bit and you, for instance, start selling more of this menu item 3, it changes how it's impacting the overall contribution margin and giving you a bigger dollar contribution margin for your overall menu. So understanding how that profit mix analysis unlocks hidden profit and identifying your true stars and analyzing and how to improve those items that aren't performing well. And then you protect this analysis with portion control. Consistent portion control protects your hard-earned margins from erosion. So if you're not seeing at least 65% gross profit from your food sales, and that's a low bar. Most of our fine dining establishments are getting 70% gross profit margin. Then if we need to talk, if these ideas resonate and you're not getting at least 65% gross profit margin, click the link below, grab a free profit and cash flow analysis. We'll examine your current systems, identify your biggest opportunities, and map a path to more profit. If your restaurant is generating at least $1 million in annual revenue, most restaurants can find 25,000 to 100,000 in hidden gains. Click the link below. I would love to talk to you. And until next time, have a great week.